What happens when royalty walks onto a morning talk show expecting the red carpet treatment, only to discover that charm and a warm smile won't save them from the consequences of their own words? In just 34 seconds, a single comment would unravel years of public goodwill and turn a friendly chat into the most shocking exit in daytime television history. The morning started like any other on the Lorraine Kelly show. The studio lights were bright, the audience was settled into their seats, and Lorraine herself was ready with that signature warmth she brings to every interview. She had welcomed countless guests over the years, from Hollywood stars to politicians, always managing to make them feel at home while asking the questions viewers actually wanted answered. Prince Harry arrived with an entourage that seemed far too large for a simple morning chat show appearance. There were assistants, handlers, and people whose jobs nobody could quite figure out. But Lorraine didn't let any of that faze her. She greeted him with the same genuine kindness she showed everyone, gesturing to the seat across from her and offering him a cup of tea. "Welcome to the show," Lorraine said, her Scottish accent putting everyone at ease, as it always did. "We're so glad to have you here this morning." Harry settled into his chair, but there was something different about his demeanor. Where most guests showed at least a hint of nervousness or excitement, he seemed almost bored, like this was just another obligation on a very long list. "Thanks for having me," he replied, though his tone suggested he was doing her the favor. Lorraine began with softball questions, the kind that any publicist would approve of. She asked about his recent projects, his charity work, the causes he cared about. These were opportunities for him to shine, to remind people why they had loved him in the first place. But his answers came out flat, rehearsed, like he had given the same responses 1,000 times before and couldn't be bothered to inject any life into them now. The audience shifted in their seats. This wasn't the engaging conversation they had been promised. Lorraine, ever the professional, pressed on, trying different angles to bring out something more genuine. "You've spoken before about the pressures of public life," she said, leaning forward with genuine interest. "How do you handle those difficult moments when the spotlight feels too intense?" Harry let out a long sigh, one that seemed designed to communicate just how tired he was of being asked such things. "You know, Lorraine, I think that's part of the problem. Everyone always wants to know how I'm handling things, how I'm coping, like I'm some sort of charity case that needs constant checking up on." There was an edge to his voice now, something sharp that hadn't been there before. Lorraine's expression didn't change, but those who knew her well could see the slight shift. The way her eyes became just a fraction more alert. "I don't think anyone sees you that way," Lorraine responded carefully. "People ask because they care." "Do they?" Harry shot back. "Or do they ask because it makes good television? Because it gives them something to talk about over their morning coffee?" The studio had gone very quiet. The audience members exchanged glances. This wasn't the playful banter they had expected. This was something else entirely. Lorraine maintained her composure, that steady professionalism that had made her one of the most respected hosts in British television. "I think you might be surprised by how genuinely people do care. The viewers watching right now, they're not looking for drama. They're interested in your work, your perspective." Harry leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "My perspective. Right. And if my perspective doesn't match what they want to hear, what then?" "Then you share it honestly," Lorraine said simply. "That's what we're here for. Honest conversation." "Honest conversation," Harry repeated, and there was something mocking in the way he said it. That's rich, coming from someone who makes a living off asking scripted questions and pretending to care about the answers. The air in the studio changed completely. You could feel it, that collective intake of breath from everyone present. Lorraine's smile didn't waver, but there was steel behind it now. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said, her voice even and controlled. "But I can assure you, Every question I ask comes from a place of genuine interest. I've been doing this job for a very long time, and I've never once pretended to care about my guests. Harry waved a hand dismissively. Sure, sure. It's all very professional, very polished. But let's be real here. You bring people on, you ask them the questions your producers tell you to ask, and then you move on to the next one. It's a formula. There's nothing genuine about it. Lorraine set down the notes she had been holding. She didn't need them anymore. This had gone beyond the planned interview into territory that required her full attention and instinct. I'm going to push back on that, she said, and there was a firmness in her tone that made it clear she meant business. I've had the privilege of sitting across from thousands of people over my career. I've heard stories that made me laugh, stories that made me cry, stories that changed the way I see the world. To suggest that I'm just going through the motions is not only insulting to me, it's insulting to every single person who has trusted me enough to share their truth. Harry's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not on television, and especially not by someone who was supposed to be grateful for his presence. Well, maybe, he said, his voice rising slightly, if you asked better questions, you'd get better answers. Did you ever think of that? The questions are perfectly fine, Lorraine replied, her Scottish lilt becoming more pronounced, as it often did when she was holding back frustration. What's not fine is a guest who comes on the show with an attitude and then blames everyone else when the conversation doesn't go the way they imagined. The audience was completely silent now, watching this unfold like spectators at a tennis match, their heads turning back and forth between host and guest. Harry stood up slightly, then sat back down, clearly agitated. You don't know anything about the pressure I'm under. The constant scrutiny, the expectations, the way everything I say gets twisted and analyzed. You're right, Lorraine said, and for a moment it seemed like she might be backing down. But then she continued, I don't know exactly what that's like, but I do know what it's like to work hard, to show up every day, and try to do right by people. And I know what it's like to be disrespected by someone who thinks their title gives them permission to treat others poorly. Harry's face flushed red. Excuse me? You heard me, Lorraine said calmly. You came on this show, and instead of engaging in a respectful conversation, you've spent the entire time insulting me, insulting the format, insulting the very people who tune in every morning. And for what? Because you're having a bad day? Because you think you're above all this? I never said I was above anything, Harry protested, but his voice lacked conviction. You didn't have to say it, Lorraine replied. Your entire attitude has made it perfectly clear. The sighs, the dismissive comments, the way you can't even be bothered to give a genuine answer to a simple question. You know what that tells me? It tells me that you don't actually want to be here. And if you don't want to be here, then why waste everyone's time? Harry's eyes narrowed. Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't want to be here. Maybe I'm tired of people like you, thinking you have the right to ask me anything you want just because you have a camera pointed at me. People like me, Lorraine repeated slowly. And what kind of person am I exactly? The kind who profits off other people's stories, Harry said, and now he was fully committed to this path, his voice growing louder. The kind who pretends to be everyone's friend, but is really just looking for the next headline, the next moment that will get shared on social media. Lorraine stood up. It was a subtle movement, but it commanded attention. She wasn't tall, but in that moment, she seemed to fill the entire studio. I'm going to tell you something, she said, her voice quiet but powerful. In all my years of doing this job, I have treated every single guest with respect and dignity. I have listened to their stories. I have laughed with them. I have cried with them. I have given them a platform to share whatever they wanted to share. And never, not once, have I had to sit here and be told that I'm fake, that I don't care, that I'm just in it for the headlines. Well, there's a first time for everything, Harry muttered. Yes, there is, Lorraine agreed. And this is the first time I'm going to have to ask a guest to leave my show. The words hung in the air. The audience gasped. Harry looked genuinely shocked, as if he couldn't quite believe what he had just heard. What did you say? He asked. I said, Lorraine repeated clearly, that I'm asking you to leave. This interview is over. Harry let out a laugh, but it was harsh and humorless. You can't be serious. Do you have any idea who I am? I know exactly who you are, Lorraine said. And right now, you're someone who is being asked to leave my show because you can't manage to show basic courtesy and respect. This is ridiculous, Harry said, looking around as if expecting someone to come to his rescue. You can't just kick me off. I can, and I am, Lorraine stated firmly. This is my show. These are my viewers. And I won't sit here and let you insult all of us, just because you're in a mood. Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Fine. I didn't want to be here anyway. This whole thing is beneath me. There it is, Lorraine said, nodding. That's what this has been about all along. You think this is beneath you. You think I'm beneath you. You think the people watching are beneath you. I didn't say that, Harry protested weakly. You didn't have to, Lorraine replied. Every word out of your mouth has said it for you. And you know what? If you truly believe that, then you're right. You shouldn't be here. Because this show is for people who understand that conversation is a two-way street, that respect goes both ways, and that no title or position gives you the right to treat others like they're less than you. Harry's face had gone from red to pale. He looked like he wanted to say something, to mount some kind of defense, but the words wouldn't come. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Your publicist told us you wanted to connect with regular people, Lorraine continued, her voice softer now, but no less pointed. That you wanted to show a different side of yourself. Well, congratulations. You've certainly done that. Just not in the way anyone expected. One of Harry's handlers had appeared at the edge of the set, looking panicked and confused. Harry turned to him, then back to Lorraine, then to the audience, as if trying to find someone who would take his side. But the audience sat in stunned silence, their faces a mixture of shock and secondhand embarrassment. You're making a mistake, Harry said, but there was no conviction behind the words. The only mistake, Lorraine said, was thinking this interview could work when you clearly had no interest in actually participating in it. I've given you multiple chances to reset, to start over, to engage genuinely. You've chosen not to take any of them. Harry started to walk toward the exit, then stopped and turned back. You'll regret this. Do you know what kind of backlash you're going to face? Lorraine met his gaze steadily. I'll face whatever comes, but I'll do it knowing that I stood up for myself, for my show, and for basic human decency. Can you say the same? For a moment, it looked like Harry might respond. His mouth twitched, his hands clenched at his sides. But then he simply turned and walked off the set, his footsteps echoing in the silent studio. His entourage scrambled after him, whispering urgently among themselves. Lorraine stood there for a long moment, watching him go. Then she turned back to the camera, to her audience, and that warm smile returned to her face, though there was something tired behind it now. Well, she said, letting out a breath, that was not how I expected this morning to go. A few nervous laughs rippled through the audience. The tension that had gripped the studio began to slowly release its hold. I want to apologize to all of you watching at home. Lorraine continued, sitting back down in her chair. You tuned in expecting a nice conversation, and instead you got, well, whatever that was. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I've been hosting this show for a very long time. I've had difficult interviews before. I've had guests who were nervous, guests who were guarded, guests who clearly didn't want to be there. But I've always tried to meet them where they are, to find some common ground, to have a conversation that means something. That's what this show is about. That's what it's always been about. Her voice was steady, but you could hear the emotion underneath it. What you just saw was not how I like to handle things. I don't enjoy conflict. I don't enjoy having to ask someone to leave. But I also won't sit here and be disrespected. And I won't let my viewers be disrespected either. You all deserve better than that. This show deserves better than that. The audience began to applaud. It started slowly. Just a few people. But then it grew, filling the studio with sound. Lorraine looked surprised, touched even, by the response. "Thank you," she said, her eyes glistening slightly. "Thank you for that. It means more than you know." She took a sip of water from the mug on her desk, the same mug she used every day, and seemed to collect herself. "The thing is," she said, setting the mug down, "I believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt. I believe in second chances, in trying to understand where someone is coming from, even when they're being difficult. But there's a line. There has to be. And when someone crosses that line repeatedly, when they make it clear that they have no interest in mutual respect, then sometimes you have to make a hard choice." She looked directly into the camera. "I made that choice today, and I'd make it again. Because at the end of the day, this show is built on respect. Respect for our guests. Respect for our viewers. Respect for the conversations we have. Without that, we have nothing." The audience applauded again, longer this time, and Lorraine smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Right," she said, clapping her hands together. "Shall we move on? We've got a lovely segment coming up about rescue dogs that I think will be a much better use of everyone's time." And just like that, she pivoted, moving the show forward as if nothing had happened. But everyone watching knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. They had seen someone stand up for themselves, with grace and dignity. They had seen professionalism in its truest form. Behind the scenes, the production team was in chaos. Phones were ringing off the hook. Social media was exploding. But out on that set, Lorraine Kelly sat calmly in her chair, welcoming her next guest with the same warmth she had shown at the start of the day. Because that's who she was. That's who she had always been. Someone who showed up, did her job with integrity, and never let anyone make her feel small. The rescue dog segment went off without a hitch. The dogs were adorable. The trainer was engaging, and the audience was charmed. It was exactly the kind of uplifting content that the show was known for. But everyone there knew that this particular episode would not be remembered for the dogs. During the commercial break, Lorraine's producer came over, concern written all over his face. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Lorraine nodded. "I'm fine. Really. It needed to be done." "The phones haven't stopped ringing," he told her. "It's everywhere already." "I figured it would be," Lorraine said. "But we did the right thing. I know we did." "I'm not questioning that," the producer assured her. I'm proud of you. That took guts." Lorraine smiled at him. "Well, I've never been short on those." When the show came back from commercial, Lorraine addressed what had happened one more time, but only briefly. "I know some of you are probably still processing what happened earlier," she said, "and I just want to say one more thing about it. And then we're going to let it go and enjoy the rest of our morning together." The audience leaned in, listening. Everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect. Everyone. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what your title is. We're all human beings, and we all deserve that basic level of decency. I try to live by that principle every day, in every interview, in every interaction. And I expect the same in return. That's all this was about. Nothing more, nothing less. She paused, letting her words sink in. Now, let's talk about this incredible new cookbook that's just come out. I've been trying some of the recipes at home, and let me tell you, they're absolutely delicious. and with that, she moved on. The rest of the show proceeded normally. There were cooking demonstrations, and book discussions, and musical performances. Lorraine laughed and chatted, and engaged with her guests in that effortless way she had. If you had tuned in halfway through, you never would have known that anything unusual had happened. But the audience knew. The crew knew. And most importantly, Lorraine knew. She had drawn a line, and she had held it. In a world where celebrities often got away with poor behavior simply because of their status, she had said, "Enough is enough." As the show wound down and the final credits prepared to roll, Lorraine gave her usual sign-off. "Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been quite a day, hasn't it? But we got through it together, and we'll do the same tomorrow. Take care of yourselves, be kind to each other, and I'll see you bright and early. Bye for now." The cameras cut, the lights dimmed slightly, and Lorraine let out a long breath. Her team gathered around her, offering support and solidarity. She hugged a few of them, thanked them for having her back, and then headed to her dressing room. Alone for the first time since it all happened, she sat down at her vanity and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked tired, which made sense. It had been an exhausting morning, but she also looked strong, resolute, like someone who had faced a challenge and come through it with her integrity intact. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends and colleagues, all offering their support. She scrolled through them, grateful for the outpouring of kindness. But she didn't respond yet. She needed a moment to herself first. She thought about what Harry had said, about her profiting off other people's stories. It stung, not because it was true, but because it was so fundamentally wrong about who she was and what she did. Every interview she conducted was an opportunity to learn something new, to understand someone better, to share their perspective with the world. It was never about exploitation. It was about connection. And that's what made his comments so hurtful, because they suggested that all these years, all these conversations, all these relationships she had built were somehow fake or manufactured. But they weren't. They were real. They mattered. And she wasn't going to let anyone convince her otherwise. There was a knock at her door. Her assistant poked her head in. "Just checking on you," she said softly. "I'm good," Lorraine replied, and she meant it. "Really, I'm good." "You were amazing out there," the assistant said. "I've never seen anything like it." Lorraine smiled. "Well, hopefully we never have to see anything like it again. Once is quite enough." They both laughed, and the tension that had been coiled tight in Lorraine's shoulders finally began to ease. She stood up, smoothed down her dress, and prepared to face whatever came next. Because that's what she did. She showed up, she did her job, and she treated people with respect. And if they couldn't return that respect, well, they knew where the door was. The story of what happened that morning spread like wildfire. Within hours, clips were circulating online. People were taking sides, offering opinions, analyzing every word and gesture. But through it all, one thing remained clear. Lorraine Kelly had stood her ground. She had refused to be diminished or disrespected. And in doing so, she had reminded everyone watching what true professionalism looked like. It wasn't about never making waves or always keeping the peace. It was about knowing your worth, understanding your boundaries, and having the courage to enforce them when necessary. Even when it was uncomfortable, even when it was difficult, even when the person sitting across from you had a title and a platform and expected special treatment. Because at the end of the day, a talk show is just a conversation between two people. And like any conversation, it requires both parties to participate in good faith. When one person refuses to do that, when they treat the whole thing like an inconvenience or an obligation, then the conversation breaks down, and someone has to have the courage to acknowledge that. That's what Lorraine did. She acknowledged it, she addressed it, and she ended it. Not with cruelty or vindictiveness, but with clarity and firmness. She didn't attack him personally or try to humiliate him. She simply stated her boundaries and followed through when they were crossed. In the days that followed, many people would analyze what happened and why. They would debate whether she had been too harsh or not harsh enough. They would speculate about the fallout and the implications, but none of that noise could change the fundamental truth of what had occurred in that studio. A woman had stood up for herself and her values. A host had protected the integrity of her show. A professional had drawn a line and refused to let it be crossed. And in a world that often rewards bad behavior from those with power and status, that simple act of self-respect became something revolutionary. That morning, Lorraine Kelly showed everyone watching that no title, no fame, no position gives anyone the right to treat others poorly. That respect is not negotiable. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply say no. The interview that never finished became one of the most talked about moments in television history, not because of what was said, but because of what was done. Because one person decided that enough was enough. And when the dust settled and the noise died down, Lorraine Kelly would return to her show the next morning and every morning after that. She would welcome new guests with the same warmth and openness she always had. She would ask thoughtful questions and listen to the answers. She would create space for genuine conversation and real connection, because that's who she was. And no single difficult interview, no matter how dramatic or widely discussed, could change that. She was Lorraine Kelly, a professional, a host, a woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to stand up for it. And that morning, in those 34 seconds, when everything changed, she reminded the world what that looked like.